What did a dying person whisper that still haunts you? It was never supposed to be more than a courtesy visit, a reluctant return to a man whose presence had always been more an echo than a voice. Uncle Roderick, father's older brother, a fixture of somber family gatherings and tobacco-stained silences, had been dying for weeks, clinging to existence in that sprawling house up on Halcyon Ridge where sunlight filtered through lace curtains but warmth never quite made it to the skin. The family said he was fading, that it would be a mercy, that the man had already died in all the ways that mattered. But they didn't tell Elijah about the look in his eyes, the flickering, desperate clarity that sometimes returns just before the end, like a candle flaring up in protest before being smothered by the dark. Elijah had come out of guilt, mostly. He hadn't spoken to Roderick in years. Their last conversation had been brittle, a haphazard exchange of pleasantries when Elijah's mother passed. But now, seated in that narrow room where the clock ticked too slowly and the wallpaper seemed to breathe in patterns just shy of animate, Elijah found himself waiting for something unnamed, not death, not closure, just something. Roderick lay in the bed like a monument collapsing in slow motion, his face sunken, skin parchment thin, knuckles like broken hinges under the sheets. His breathing was shallow, erratic, but his eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling with a glassy intensity. For hours, Elijah sat beside him in silence, the nurse having excused herself with the practiced compassion of someone used to watching people vanish by inches. The house was quiet except for the whisper of curtains and the slow metronome of decay ticking through Roderick's chest. It was just after dusk when it happened. The room had grown darker, colors bleeding into indistinction, when Roderick stirred. His lips moved first, then his head turned, slowly, painfully toward Elijah. And then, in a voice no louder than a breath pressed between syllables, he spoke. 3 words. No preamble. No goodbye. She's still alive. The air in the room froze, not chilled, froze, as if the molecules themselves had paused in a collective gasp. Elijah leaned forward, startled. What? Who? But Roderick was already gone, not dead, not yet. But the awareness had vanished from his eyes. They turned glassy again, this time with finality. The life had retreated somewhere unreachable. He didn't speak again. He passed before midnight. The funeral was expected, dreary, populated by familiar faces lined with forgetfulness. No one mentioned the whisper. Elijah didn't tell them. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it felt too intimate, too wrong to share. Or maybe it was the weight of the words themselves, the way they rang with a certainty that dug into his bones like iron splinters. She's still alive. The problem was that no one was supposed to be missing. No lost sister, no vanished lover, no whispered rumors in the family tree. There was no she to account for. His father, when asked gently days later, merely frowned and said Roderick had been muttering nonsense at the end. He was sick, confused. He barely knew where he was. But the tone. Elijah couldn't stop thinking about it. It hadn't been the rambling of a man unraveling at the seams. It had been measured, intentional. It hadn't even sounded like regret, more like revelation. In the weeks that followed, Elijah found himself returning to the sentence again and again, running his fingers over it in his mind like a man tracing letters on a gravestone he couldn't read. He scoured old photographs, rifled through forgotten albums in the attic, read and reread every letter Roderick had written to anyone in the family. The more he searched, the more he began to feel the shape of something missing. A negative space in the family's history, a subtle absence that seemed to warp the rest of the story around it. Then came the letter. It arrived folded into a yellowed envelope with no return address, slipped through the crack in his door one morning like a shadow. No postage, no explanation. Inside, one sentence, typed in fading ink. The girl in the cellar never died. There had never been a cellar. At least, not one anyone had mentioned. Halcyon Ridge, the family house, had a basement, sure. But Roderick always called it a root vault, a storage space. Elijah had never been allowed down there as a child. Too damp, they said. Mold. He remembered the door, thick and old, set beneath the back stairwell, padlocked and rusting. He remembered asking his mother once what was down there. She had hesitated for a full 10 seconds before replying, "Nothing worth remembering." 2 days later, Elijah returned to the house. The place had already been passed to the estate, locked and left to stagnate. The key took effort to turn. The halls inside felt unfamiliar, like the ghosts of the furniture had rearranged themselves in his absence. He moved on instinct alone, bypassing the parlor, the dust-heavy bedrooms, the room where Roderick died, and made his way to the basement door. The padlock was still there, cold, brittle. One strike with a hammer cracked it open. He descended the steps slowly, each creak a warning. The air was damp and metallic, laced with the scent of time denied. At the bottom, the basement stretched longer than he remembered. Stone walls, a single bulb dangling from the ceiling, and at the far end a second door, metal, bolted, reinforced from the outside. His breath caught. The lock on that door was newer, replaced. Elijah stood there, palm on the handle, heartbeat in his teeth. She's still alive. He turned the knob. The story wouldn't let him stop. The knob turned with a metallic groan, reluctant as if protesting against its own unveiling. Rust flaked onto Elijah's palm, the cold iron biting into his skin like it remembered being touched last by someone it wasn't supposed to forget. He pushed. The door opened with a drawn-out whine, not unlike an animal forced from hibernation, and the room beyond revealed itself by degrees. A shifting patchwork of darkness interrupted only by the weak, pulsing light from the bulb behind him. It barely pierced the gloom. The air changed as soon as he crossed the threshold. The temperature dropped, not in the way of cold air, but in the sense of absence. Warmth didn't fade so much as retreat, as though something unseen had swallowed it whole. The air carried the scent of metal and mildew, but beneath that, something sweeter. Almost medicinal, almost raw. He stepped in further. The room wasn't large. The stone walls were closer than they'd looked at first, slanted at odd angles, pressing inward as if the architecture had been warped by intention, not error. There were no windows, no vents. Only one object sat in the center of the floor, a wooden chair stripped of varnish, arms darkened by years of contact. And beside it, resting gently against the wall, was a small porcelain doll, its glassy eyes faced forward. Its dress was stained at the hem. A crack split one cheek. Elijah's skin crawled. The doll felt positioned, not dropped, not discarded, placed. He turned his gaze from it, unsettled by its hollow stare, and examined the rest of the room. To the far right stood a narrow cot, covered in brittle yellowed sheets. On it, a faded blanket lay folded with surgical precision, too tidy to have been forgotten. On the wall above the cot, crude etchings carved into stone curved across the surface in loops and slashes. Countless tally marks, hundreds at least, maybe thousands. Days, years, an entire timeline mapped in gouges and desperation. And then, the noise, not loud, just a scrape, from the far corner, too deliberate to be the house settling, too gentle to be rats. Elijah froze. His breath hitched. The scrape came again, a whisper of movement just beyond the shadows, dragging across stone. Slow, measured. He stepped backward instinctively, eyes straining. Then a voice, hoarse and hollow, rasped from the dark. "Did he send you?" Elijah stopped breathing. The voice didn't belong to memory or dream. It belonged to something that had been waiting. He swallowed and stepped forward, slowly, carefully. "Who are you?" The shadows shifted. A figure emerged from the corner, not crawling, not limping, just gliding. A woman, thin, dressed in remnants of clothing so faded their color was indistinguishable. Her hair was matted, gray, though her face was ageless in the most unnatural way. Like something paused just before breaking. Her eyes caught the light, pale, wide, fixed on his with an intensity that hollowed his bones. "You have his eyes," she said, voice dry like sand scraped over stone. "Whose eyes?" Elijah asked, although some part of him already knew. Her gaze didn't waver. "Roderick, my brother." He staggered. The name crashed into him like a wave, all meaning warped. "You're his sister?" She nodded once. "He said he'd come back. Then he said he wouldn't. Then he stopped talking altogether." Elijah felt the walls contract around him. "But you died. Everyone said you died young. There's no record, no mention." "They erased me," she whispered. "First from the house, then from the family, then from memory." "Why?" His voice trembled despite him. The woman, no, the girl who should have been a woman long ago, stepped toward him. Her bare feet made no sound. Her face was not angry, not frightened, just exhausted. Because I remembered. The phrase chilled him. Remembered what? They thought I was lying, she murmured. When I said the man in the orchard came into my room at night. When I said the shadows whispered my name. When I said something was wrong with the mirror in the west hallway. She looked past him now, seeing something older than language. Roderick tried to help, at first. Then they changed him. Changed? She stepped back, expression empty. He was the one who locked the door. Elijah couldn't speak, couldn't move. The weight of it all pressed against his chest like a hand that didn't want him to breathe. I was the secret he couldn't carry. So he buried me, alive, but unseen. Her eyes narrowed. But he remembered. At the end, he remembered. The whisper. She's still alive. Elijah stepped closer. I'll get you out. Her eyes darkened. I don't know if I can leave. You can. You will. The conviction in his voice surprised even him. She hesitated, gaze flickering to the hallway beyond. If I leave, it might follow. What? She said nothing, just stared past him at the corridor. And in that moment, Elijah realized she wasn't afraid of being trapped. She was afraid of what the house kept contained. Something that had stayed quiet for decades. Something she had kept locked away. Presence. An echo that had grown in silence, feeding on abandonment, on fear, on bloodless grief. We're not alone down here, she whispered. Not anymore. And behind Elijah in the stairwell came the soft, deliberate click of the basement door. Closing. The click of the basement door echoed like a judge's gavel, final and damning. Elijah spun around, but the door was already closed, the metal latch audibly sliding into place, as though commanded by unseen hands. He darted toward it, fingers grasping the knob, twisting it hard. Locked. The sound reverberated through the stone like a breath drawn by something that had been waiting far too long to inhale. Behind him, the girl, Roderick's sister, the ghost of an erased name, stood motionless. Her face was unreadable, but not devoid of emotion. It was layered, as though her expressions had been peeled back one by one over the decades, leaving only the bone-deep impression of exhaustion. Elijah, she said, softly now, you shouldn't have come alone. He turned, frustration and panic threading together in his voice. You could have warned me. I did, she answered. I told you we weren't alone. A pulse stirred through the floor, subtle but undeniable. A deep thrum, like something shifting its weight beneath them. Not the foundation, not the earth. Something older, something sentient. Elijah felt it crawl up through his heels and lodge itself behind his ribs. What is it? He asked, though he already sensed the answer would fall beyond words. Her voice came low and deliberate. The reason I was locked down here, not because I was mad, not because I was sick, because I saw it. And once you've seen it, it doesn't let you go. Elijah backed away from the door, toward the girl, toward the center of the room. Why didn't it take you? She didn't speak immediately. Her eyes shimmered in the dim light, catching something invisible in the shadows. It tried, night after night. But I stayed awake. I watched. I memorized its movements, its patterns. I was never a child to it. I became a mirror. It can't consume what reflects it. Elijah blinked. Then what does it want now? You, she whispered. You're not a mirror. You're still whole. The air warped. From the far corner of the basement, the shadows grew longer, coalescing into something denser than darkness. A figure, indistinct at first, began to form, not with clarity but with presence, like something remembered from a dream you should never have had. It was tall, gaunt, composed of something less than flesh and more than smoke. Its limbs did not bend correctly. Its head twitched in increments. When it moved, the air groaned. No eyes, no mouth, no definition, only suggestion. It radiated wrongness in a way the human brain struggled to translate. And then it spoke. Not aloud, but into Elijah's thoughts directly. A language constructed not from words, but from pressure and terror. You know now. You opened the door. Elijah stumbled backward, clutching his head, vision fracturing. His heart punched his ribs like it wanted out. No, he murmured. No, I didn't want this. I just wanted to know the truth. The girl, no, the woman who had remained hidden beneath a lie her whole life, stood between Elijah and the thing now, her figure slight against its towering silhouette. It was never about what you wanted, she said. It was about what he whispered. Roderick didn't just tell you I was alive, he passed it to you. The knowledge, the tether. The creature hissed, not a sound, but a vibration that shook dust from the ceiling. Elijah's mind reeled. Why would he do that? Because he was dying, she answered. He thought by speaking it, he could shed the burden, pass it on, let someone else bear the weight of the knowing. That's why the family never asked, why they pretended I didn't exist. Because once you ask the question, once you look for me, it finds you. The entity began to move again, slithering without motion, gliding across the stones with a grace that mocked gravity. Elijah could feel it growing clearer, not because it was stepping into the light, but because it no longer had to hide. The secret had already been shared, the invitation already issued. He could feel it brushing against the edge of his thoughts now, prodding the weaker parts of his mind, slipping in through doubt and fear. It fed on belief. It strengthened through attention. I can't fight it, he said, panic rising. It's in my head. You can't fight it with strength, she agreed, but you can contain it. How? Do what Roderick wouldn't. Don't pass it on. Don't speak it again. Don't write about it. Don't describe it. Don't name it. Elijah's breath hitched. Then what? Let it take me? She stepped closer, voice now resolute. No, let it end. You carry the key now. But you're not trapped in this room. The trap is the knowledge, the story. You can still stop it, if you choose silence. The realization landed like thunder behind his eyes. Roderick had made his mistake the moment he whispered the words. He had passed the key and unlocked the door, and now Elijah was the new bearer. To speak the truth was to perpetuate the cycle. To chase understanding was to feed the thing. He looked to the creature. It hovered now, closer than breath, its form rippling like water over a wound. It reached one malformed hand toward him, beckoning. Not a threat, an invitation. Elijah turned away. He faced the woman and nodded. Close the door, he said. Together they walked to the door, back through the threshold. The creature didn't follow. It couldn't. It waited, imprisoned by unspoken truth. It had power only if witnessed. The door groaned shut behind them, and Elijah drove the latch back into place. Then, with trembling hands, he picked up the hammer and shattered the key. The girl, his aunt, the erased presence of his own bloodline, stood in the hallway beside him, silent, watching. She was thinner now, less spectral, her face already shifting from ageless fear into something softer. Will it stay? He asked, barely above a whisper. It will sleep, she said, as long as we don't wake it. Together, they climbed the stairs, leaving the stone behind. Outside, dawn broke over Halcyon Ridge. A pale, indifferent light spilled over the overgrown grass and the broken path leading away from the house. The world had not changed, but Elijah had, and he would never speak of what had been said in that room again. The whisper had ended with him,